Yes.
And we are live now.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Shaking his head yes. Greg.
Morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate everybody joining us this morning at 9 o'clock. This is our first ever virtual Citizens Advisory Council meeting. So I appreciate everybody making the effort to join us virtually. I know it's not the same as being in person, but we can definitely accomplish the same goals that we set for the group. So I'll call the meeting to order and ask if there's any new business. Hearing no new business, what I'd like to do, we introduced each other the last meeting, but there was a couple that were not able to be on. So what I'd like to do, if we could start, Olga, would you briefly introduce yourself to Brian, to the group, because Brian's new to our membership.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Olga Boucher. I'm originally from Brazil. I've been here in the US for over 25 years, came as a teenager, absolutely love it. I have a passion for helping others. I worked in the nonprofit sector for a little bit over a decade, and now I'm in the insurance business here in Albemarle County, and very excited to be part of this meeting.
Thank you. And I still don't see Brent on the call, and maybe he'll pop in later. Brian, would you mind introducing yourself again so Olga gets to know who you are as well?
Yes. Good morning. I'm Brian Williams. I'm relatively new to the area. Been here about 3 years almost. I teach at the University of Virginia in the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. And I'm really passionate about trying to build bridges to address issues that impact police-community relations. That's my primary area of research. Glad to be on board.
Thank you for your time and joining us. Cindy, I'm going to put you on the spot and introduce yourself because there's some new faces.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Jones. I'm the assistant to the chief of police. I've been with the county for about 28 years now. So been home working since March. So that took a little getting used to, but this is nice to see everybody again. Listen, people.
Well, thanks for joining us, Cindy. We appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
And Cindy's going to be taking notes for us during the meeting as a backup, even though the meeting's being recorded. Way we have the physical meeting notes as well. So the next thing that I was going to do on our agenda is, if you would, Abby, go ahead and put that agenda up now, just so everybody can take a look at it before I roll on to the next. And we'll just put it up one time for about 30 seconds so everybody gets a look at it. Thank you. Does everybody see it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's able to see. This is what we're going to go over today. You're going to hear a lot from me, where you see the updates from the chief. That's probably going to be the majority of today's meeting. We have to elect a new chair and a vice chair today. And once we elect the new chair, then we'll turn the meeting over to that person, and they will then be the person running the meeting for us. So Abby, I appreciate you setting that up there. Any questions on the agenda from anybody in the group? Okay, hearing none, Abby, you can go ahead and take that down. Thank you. So at this point, I will take any motions. If anybody has a motion they'd like to make to nominate somebody to be the chair, and that would be the time to do that.
I would like to nominate Mr. Hewitt to be the chair.
Excellent. So Olga, that was Olga made the nomination for Richard. Could I get a second?
You have a second?
The second's John Spriggett. Cindy?
Got it.
Thank you. Richard, do you accept the task?
I accept the task with a big smile.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. So Richard, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you, and you can work through the vice chair if you would.
Okay, do we have a nomination for a vice chair?
I would like to nominate Olga.
Oh.
And I would like to second that.
Outstanding. Olga, do you accept that?
Isn't it funny how these things happen? Yes, I definitely do. Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. And thank you both. I appreciate it.
Ron, we might, just to make it official, have a vote for both of those. And you could probably be a vote.
That's a great idea.
One motion for both.
Okay.
Liaison, I don't vote on anything, but I'm just.
Yeah, it's a great point, Diane. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
So I need one motion for both of the seats. somebody to make a motion that we accept both those seats.
So moved.
Second,
John, who was the second?
Brian.
Brian, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, Diantha. Richard, turn it back to you.
Okay, then. Well, again, good morning to everybody. And this is a little bit unusual for me and for most of us, but it seems like this is going to be very workable for the time being. Chief, there's a number of updates that myself and others are interested in hearing from you on, and in particular also the community. Could you begin with the COVID-19 and all the issues associated with that with respect to the department and its participation and its help for our community?
Absolutely. Thank you. And I just want to let everybody know, usually when we're in a meeting, I'm speaking from memory, but this is so important today that I actually made some notes because there's a lot of things that happened during COVID that I want to make sure that I highlight so the group gets an understanding exactly what your police department has been doing since March and how we've had to adapt.
Take your time and please be thorough.
Absolutely. So as everybody knows, this kicked in March of this year. That's when schools started closing down and we went into, I call it basically phase 0 locally and nationally. And we had the local state of emergency and we had to quickly adapt, not only as a police department, but the organization had to adapt to that change and what we were going to do and try to minimize the number of people that were in the building. So the first thing you heard so many times is social distancing and cleaning your workspace and things like that, decon. We had to go out and purchase a lot of PPE gear. It's personal protective equipment that we normally wouldn't hold on site to give each officer and each employee that was working in the building the ability to have that protective equipment. I can't tell you how many times in the first month we had to identify a list of people that were high risk that we had to identify so they could fill out the proper paperwork. We could work through the COVID leave, if you will, for those that were in high risk. We had to make concessions for people to be able to telework, which today we're still doing, as Cindy is doing right now. And we have currently on the police department, I have over 50 people, 50 of my employees that are still teleworking that started back in March, around March 18th, I think it was the day, give or take. And we've done a lot of review of that, and there's a lot of positives that have come out of the teleworking. As an organization, a leadership team spearheaded by our county executive, we don't want to lose that momentum. We've learned a lot of things from teleworking, and so what we're doing is we're working on a very robust policy. So sometimes good things come out of bad things, and I think in this case, that's one of the positives that's come out of this, is we realize we can provide equal or better service, minimize our carbon footprint, have a lot more open parking at both the county office buildings by having a lot more folks teleworking. Diantha, you're shaking your head because you and I see the parking situation every day. So we've noticed that's been a huge plus. So that was just the initial phases where we went into COVID. And this, as you guys know, it's unknown territory for everybody. So we were learning as we were taking baby steps. So then second phase kicked in. And the second phase was a modified response by my police officers. And we put so much information out on social media through press releases to educate the public what to expect, to let them know that if you called 911, the person on the other end of the phone from our emergency dispatch center would be doing what was called COVID screening. So they were asking the particular questions to make sure there was no symptoms that they were COVID exposed. If they were, the officers were going to take additional steps. And most importantly, 90% of the time we would ask they would meet us outside of their residence as opposed to inside their residence, so we can meet out in open air. And that's a change from normal. If somebody calls the police, typically we meet them wherever they're at. So we had to adjust to that. Face coverings are still mandatory. They became mandatory back then. Officers have to wear it on every traffic stop, every encounter with a citizen. Anytime they walk into a building, they have to wear their face covering. So we've had to purchase even more of those. We've been lucky working through a grant that the Board of Supervisors and Diantha approved that we were able to get passed through. I believe it was last week, Diantha.
Yeah.
able to get a grant for like 39,000 for more PPE equipment. So we're going to be in really good shape. So that really helped us out a lot because we're going through those masks. I think the real good ones with the filters, literally you can only wear them like 7 times. And then after that, they're infected, you got to get a new one. So you can imagine an officer working a 5-day work week, how many times they're going to go through that mask. So those are some of the other things that we did. And again, we got creative and stuff that we wouldn't think about. We can't transport a prisoner if we have to make an arrest in the cruiser. We can't social distance. So what we did was we put out our transport van. So we have a transport van and we would designate one person, and they're still doing it today, that would be out and available to make the transport so we could socially distance. And that's something we had never done before. And we learned that the van broke down multiple times and had to get service done, which we would have never known otherwise. But now it's been working for us. The SROs, for example, school obviously got sent home for virtual. So we put the SROs in patrol, and they were helping with augmenting the patrol officers and different staffing like that. To this day, we still have no access to our building, either here at 5th Street or at McIntyre. So that's something obviously that's new. I think McIntyre and here social services, if it's an emergency by appointment, and same with the police department, if it's an emergency, but otherwise our building is closed. The lobby area is closed to the public. And there's a way, we have an ambassador assigned to our building that will help citizens out there and guide them to get the service they need. And it's been working out really well for us to be able to do that. Internally, we froze all training, so we couldn't track the training. But you know, when the training right now is probably one of the biggest national topics besides policy and law enforcement. We've had to cancel all training except for online. And what we learned was online could be used a lot more. That platform was even determined to be even a better way for us to have our officers attend training, save money. They don't have to drive all the way over to Weir's Cave to our academy. They could do it right here, and they could be available in the event an emergency took place. So we're still doing online. Most of you may or may not know that I'm the chair of the Academy's executive board. I was called, we had an academy in session when this took place, and I was asked my opinion by the academy chair, and I said we need to follow CDC guidelines and make sure that we're doing exactly what we're told to do. So we absolutely sent everybody home from the academy and postponed the academy, suspended it while it was in the middle of the training. And I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's probably a good month and a half or 2 months before we sent them back. And the only way we were able to send them back was I needed to be assured that we could follow the CDC guidelines when we went back in from phase 1 to phase 2 and phase 3 as a state, that we could socially distance, that we had the means at the academy to be able to screen people as they came in the building, and they're able to do that now. So far, I'm knocking on wood. There's been no issues over at the academy. And I need to let everybody know just how important it was to get them back in. There's 59 agencies that use the academy. So think about 59 agencies or a smaller sheriff's department that has 2 people in the academy, and they need those positions filled. So it was critical for us to be able to do that. And so far, I'm proud to say that we were able to have that go off without a hitch. Firearms training, something we don't even think about because we just do it when we go to the range. You know, we have a new range over on Milton Road. I still call it a new range, and it's beautiful. But thankfully, we had that new range. We have 2 different sets of ranges that we're able to social distance and be able to get people online to qualify. Roll call, something we take for granted. We all meet at the beginning of their shift. They would meet and they would go over important stuff for their shift. We had to go virtual for roll call. And that was something new, so the officers wouldn't have to come into the building. We restricted leave. You know, I know it wasn't a popular decision, but we didn't know what we didn't know when this first kicked off. So I restricted all leave for all personnel to make sure that we had ample staffing here in the event this turned into an even worse crisis. So since we've evolved a little bit, we were able to come off of that. Now we're able to offer people leave, but for the first month and a half, 2 months, I had restricted leave. Our community engagement, which is what I love doing. You guys know, and Richard, you know, I can talk for 2 hours because I'm passionate. I miss the community engagement. I miss being able to talk to people face to face versus this. And we've had to freeze those, as well as our ride along program was frozen. So that was just phase 2 of COVID. Temperature monitoring, things like that, I've mentioned already. But what we're doing now is we've gotten even more technical, if you will. When people come into our building, we have a kiosk set up here at 5th Street, and it's all out the traffic points where people enter this building. and down at McIntyre, the same thing set up. Have you guys seen the kiosk where you literally just put your head into the screen and it automatically reads your temperature? You, Olga, we actually have those set up at both locations. So each employee that enters the building has to go through that kiosk. So we took it a step further, and the county IT, thanks to Carl and his staff, created an app which every day we have to go in and it's on our share, where we have to go in and literally put our name in, what department we're with, and indicate that we did our testing and that we have no conditions that are associated with COVID. And we have to do that every day. And I can tell you, I've forgot twice, and I've been at home at 9 o'clock at night and was able to access it on my phone. And I know a lot of people are going to forget, and we're trying to send out reminder emails every day because it's very important to make sure that we have staff that you know, aren't coming to work when they're symptomatic. So I can share with you without sharing names. I have approximately 186 employees here. I'm the largest department in the organization, and that's counting my civilian staff. We have 4 confirmed that have tested positive for COVID since the onset. One of them most recently was just a few days ago. So that impact, think about a police department. If one person gets it, how we work in proximity, why it was so important for us to make sure that we didn't slack off on our protecting each other with social distancing and things like that, and wearing our mask at all times. So it was very important. So we fast forward. That's kind of what we've been dealing with. We fast forward, and Diantha will know what I'm getting ready to talk about with the ordinance the board passed most recently in Albemarle County with the distancing and the face coverings and things like that, which I think was extremely important, because I think over a period of time, people think, okay, well, it's been 4 months. I think we're okay now. And I think we see people that are getting less apt to want to wear their mask in the store, that type of thing. So the board passed an ordinance, and it was adopted on August the 1st, which makes the face coverings mandatory when we're outside or going into a business. And Diane, if I miss anything, please correct me. One of the things it does is it limits seating to 50 or 50% of the posted capacity, limits gatherings to 50 people. And we started, it was in the news, and raise your hand if you saw about our ambassador program in the news, because I know they put it out there a lot. I see a couple hands, thank you. So the ambassador program was an outstanding idea, and it's basically my dream as the chief is to be able to educate people to gain compliance. So we sent the ambassadors out, and I heard the first day they went to 40 different locations their first day, which is fantastic. And most of the businesses that they came in contact with were so receptive. They said, wow, we want help. We want to know what we need to do to make this safe so we can run our business. So we're seeing a good return on that investment. And Diane, if I'm not mistaken, that was paid through by the CARES Act for that ambassador program, I think is what they were utilizing.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So that's been a wonderful, wonderful way for us to go out and educate. We were getting calls for service from the beginning of this, the COVID thing. And if you think about when swimming pools are shut down in the middle of summer, where's everybody going to go? They're going to go to a park. They're going to go to a river. People needed to be outside. I mean, CDC, the health district, everybody was recommending people still, and today we're still recommending go outside and get exercise. Well, we were finding our parks were being, I don't use the word overrun, becoming very crowded. So what I did was I put a response team together that could educate, and were very familiar with what the code sections were. At the time, it was the governor's order about social distancing and things like that. So we were able to put some people out into the field that did some education for us. And I'm happy to report we had absolutely no issues in Albemarle County with responding to somewhere and gaining compliance. And that speaks volumes for our community. They understood the importance of it. And some of it was education. This is new for everybody. So I was very pleased, I was very pleased that we were able to make it happen that way. And Richard, that kind of covers COVID. I know I talked a lot, but I'd love to stop there before the next one in case people have questions for me regarding the COVID.
The only thing, Ron, I'll jump in and add for folks is that the county is preparing or has prepared, they're ready, signage. If a business needs a sign that just talks about the ordinance, and so you can contact the county for signage if anyone needs it, and pamphlets to describe what's going on. We did try and prepare brochures, but mainly signs for businesses, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Diantha.
Sure.
Richard, you're muted.
Chief, were the 4 cases, were they sworn officers or were they civilian employees?
How's that?
Yeah, I got you now, Richard.
Oh, okay.
Great question. 3 of them were sworn officers, 1 civilian employee.
Thank you.
As you guys are aware, if somebody tests positive, they basically do what I call an investigation backwards and see who they were in contact with. So at one point we had about 8 or 9 of our staff that had direct contact with that person that had to quarantine. And if it was early in the stages, they'd have to quarantine for 14 days. So we were down some staffing there during that time. The latest one we have, it's very isolated. So we're looking at maybe 3 or 4 people, and their time's almost up for quarantine, which is great news.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's see. John, you've had a comment. Brian, do you have any questions for the chief with respect to the issues associated with COVID-19?
No, I do not.
Okay, Diantha, you have anything additional? And Olga, do you have anything you'd like to ask about the COVID-19? All right, seeing none. I did want to ask a question myself to you, Chief, with respect to the Board of Supervisors and the resources needed associated with the issues surrounding COVID-19. Do you feel at this point you've been adequately supplied, or are there other things that you need to have that you can't get?
Great question. No, the board's been great. I mentioned earlier, the board approved a grant. I believe it was last week for us. The county itself also purchased other in the early stages PPE gear. So we've gotten great support from the county and the Board of Supervisors to make sure that our first responders are well protected and we're able to go out and do their jobs.
Well, frankly, that doesn't surprise me, being Diantha's here. Thank you, Diantha. All right, let's move on then to the next item, which is, of course, the protests and the demonstrations and things associated.
So I can talk about this for a while as well. I mean, it's something that's been going on since George Floyd was murdered. And if you guys are aware, I put a statement out right after that happened, condemning the actions of those officers, and particularly saying that I speak for everybody at ACPD, that is not police work, and they made the right decisions on that case. And I'll just leave you with that. That evolved into the police department receiving phone calls, emails, the Board of Supervisors receiving numerous emails that they forwarded to me. And I really want to take my time with this, guys, because this is important.
Please do.
Every email that we received, and I mean every single email or phone call that we received, we responded to. And I will tell you, a lot of them were repetitive emails from our community members. And one of the things that seemed to be a common theme was policy, training, and hiring. Those were all a common theme of the questions. And some of the questions were outstanding. And I was really excited to engage, even though it wasn't face-to-face, to be able to engage with the community, explain to them what the Albemarle County Police Department does and why we're not those other police departments. And yes, everybody can get better, the Albemarle County Police Department included. That's why we're doing what we're doing, is to try to be better. But we answered a lot of questions along those lines. And I wanted to be able to break those down because I think it's very relevant for this group. It's more than very relevant. It is right on cue with what's going on nationally with regard to the continued protest and calls for police reform and things like that. So one of the questions that was asked of me over and over and over is, what type of policing does Albemarle County Police Department do? And a lot of you that have been with us before understand that in 2012, I came here from another department after I retired and brought Geo Policing with me, and I implemented what's called Geo Policing. And that's a neighborhood policing model, for those of you who are not familiar with it. And the goal of Geo Policing is accountability at all levels. The officers are assigned to this exact same sector to patrol every day. And the reason for that is they make those relationships in the community with not just the residents, but they also with business owners. So they get to know who their officer is. Working in the same sector allows them to be able to understand what's going on in that community, what the needs are, and also as important is problem solve. And what we learned when we went to Geo Policing is that just all the research I had done, our initial calls went up because we were building that confidence in the community and they felt comfortable calling us in. So everybody's like, well, your calls for service are going up. Well, no, that's what we want. That means people are feeling more comfortable calling us and reporting things to us. What you want over a period of time from Geo Policing is you want your response times to go down because the officers are familiar with their sector and they know how to get there. You want your crime to go down. And most importantly, besides those factors, is you want the citizens' confidence in your police department to go up. And all those things that we've measured over the last coming up on 8 years, it's hard to believe it's been this December will be 8 years that we implemented Geo Policing. Fruition. The response times are down. I keep track of them on the annual report. Annual report just got published, and I'm going to ask when this meeting's over, if you haven't done so, Abby, to make sure we get a link sent to every member that's on the call today, so you can look at our annual report. And I think it was just 2 days ago it was brought to me. So all that information is captured in our annual report. We capture commendations from citizens, and we capture complaints on officers. We capture all those things, the whole spectrum. And Geo Policing allows us to be more transparent in that way, so we can share that information with our community because that's their expectation of us. And so I was able to get that information out to people. Some people knew about our Geo Policing thing and some had no idea what we did in Albemarle County. So we were able to get that message out. The next important question I saw over and over and over from the community was training. You always hear people say de-escalation training. Well, what does de-escalation training mean? Some community members don't know what that means. So great question they want to know, what does my police department do that to train to be the best department they can be here and come provide me service. So one of the first things that I want to do is, everybody familiar with crisis intervention training, CIT? Just give me a head nod if you're familiar with it. One of my goals as a chief, and this is a robust goal, to be 100% trained in CIT. And that's a difficult goal because you have turnover. And then we only have 2 or 3 classes of CIT a year, and I only get about 3 seats in every one of those classes. But I report today that right now, sitting in front of you with training suspended since March, we're up to 81% of my department CIT trained. And I would put that up against any other department right now. So I'm very, very proud of that. So I explained to everybody what crisis intervention training is, and people are familiar, and I'm just going to be very brief on that. It is a form of de-escalation. It's being able to train officers to talk to people that are in crisis or people that are really amped up, and be able to de-escalate them and be able to talk to them and build a rapport with them and get them the services they need. And we're finding out nationally that that's critical training for officers to have, and when dealing with the mental health, which I'll talk about later. So that's critical. The other thing that was important for me when I became the chair of the Academy Board was getting fair and impartial policing put into the Academy teaching, and it is. Now the Academy teaches the fair and impartial policing for us. So those 59 agencies, and that includes UVA and Charlottesville here locally that go to the same academy, are receiving that training, which is extremely important. Cultural diversity training is also taught through the Academy. And a lot of people didn't know that we had that through the Academy. Bias-based policing, we have that through the Academy, but we also have instructors here internally that we have that are able to teach everybody the course here in Albemarle County. And I highly recommend that course. Emotional intelligence for officers is another school that we go send our officers through. Evidence-based decision-making and officer wellness program. And what we found out nationally through research is wellness doesn't just mean like we're going outside for a walk. Wellness means mental health, and it's a lot of things. It's all encompassing. You have to have your officers in the right mental frame of mind when they go out on the street to help our community. And it's important that we have those resources in play when officers are feeling that they're struggling a little bit. And that's not just police, that's public safety, that's the private sector. They're seeing an uptick in it over COVID. And I've been reading a lot of articles on that and research. So we have those mechanisms in place here in Albemarle County. I have 2 on site, 2 folks that I can send my people to here that have been with us for about 8 years now that our officers can go talk to. So that's very important, and it's being utilized by our staff. Next question I was asked a lot was, how do you hire officers? What's that process look like? And, some people, unless you go onto our new website, which was just put out, our new one's out, I think yesterday, it went live, which I'm very excited about because I hated our old website. I know I'm not I'm not afraid to say that it was outdated. But our new website's up. So thank you for all of you that put the work into that. But if you go to the website, most websites for police departments or fire department, they'll tell you what the hiring process is. But I was able to tell the folks that were asking the questions, and I'm going to read this to you just so you get a kind of an idea what an officer goes through to get through the door here to put a uniform on. And a lot of you have heard me say this a lot of times. The ones that apply to this police department, I only hire about 3% of those folks that actually apply. So we are looking for the best of the best to come here. So the hiring process looks like they start with 3 interviews. They have to go through 3 different interviews. They have to go through a polygraph. They go through an extensive background investigation, a psychological exam, a medical exam, a drug screening, and the last thing that they go through is they have a meeting with me, and I'm the last hurdle for them, so to speak. If they're going to be hired or offered a job here, they get interviewed by me. And I think that's important, and I won't let a person get hired without me interviewing them. And I will tell you, one of the questions or one of the statements I make to each person I hire is, you live in a county, one of your loved ones has an emergency and you're not able to go help them. Do you want average or you want outstanding showing up at your doorstep? And I'm here to tell you, I'm trying to hire outstanding. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but it resonates with a lot of the people that I'm hiring, that they understand, wow, that does make sense to me when you put it in that form. So I was able to share that information with folks that were asking the questions as well. And I think that was very important for them to get an understanding. We interview a lot of people, we process a lot of people, and I will share this information with you over the last 3 months. And I'm just grabbing the figures out of the air, that don't hold me to it, but where we would normally have 80 applicants, the last few months we're down to 20 to 30 applicants. So our applicant pool has dropped. We've actually had people that were in the process notified us that they don't want to be in law enforcement anymore. They don't want to pursue that as a goal or a career. So we have seen a drop in the number of folks that are coming. As I sit here in front of you today, I am very proud to report that we are almost at full staffing. And I'm extremely proud of that. When I look at my colleagues across the state, and I get to talk to a lot of them that are really struggling. An article just came out last week, Roanoke Police Department, for example. They said they're at critical staffing levels at the city of Roanoke, and that's a pretty good sized jurisdiction. It's comparable to us with a population of over 100,000 people. So I'm very happy to report that. And we're trying to do everything we can do to keep morale going and give them the opportunities for different advancement here with the police department to make sure that we keep those people. So just for the good of the group, my authorized staffing strength is 151 officers. I had 2 officers that were approved originally for the July 1 budget, and then COVID kicked in. That would have taken us to 153. So they were taken off for obvious reasons, because we had to really tighten the belts across the organization to make sure we could pay the bill, so to speak. So we had to be very frugal. So I'm hoping that one day we'll come out of this and we'll be able to continue to build a department as the population continues to grow. So one of the things, I know Diantha will remember this, we used to do the officer per population. We've always had that. We have a goal, and it's one of the goals that we have is in the comp plan, and it's to get to 1.5 officers per 1,000. That's our goal. And that's going to take some time, but I can tell you we've made really good strides, because if you look at an annual report from 2017, we were like at about 1.25 per 1,000. Well, today we're at 1.38, so we're almost 1.4. So I'm extremely proud of that. So we're making those strides. And as long as I'm here as chief, I'm going to continue to push for and recommend that we get to that goal of 1.5, because our population is continuing to grow every year here in the county. And that makes our calls for service go up here in the county. One of the other questions that I was asked during these during the emails, the phone calls, and this is also in the annual report that I'm going to have Abby send you in the link. I was asked about demographics of the police department versus demographics of our county that we serve. And I think it's extremely important to be able to put that information out in our annual report. And Diantha and I have talked about that the last 3 annual reports. And I think we hit the mark on this one. I really believe we're where we need to be. So people ask, and this is the most up-to-date data, not from the 2010 census, but we got the most up-to-date data we could for population. in Albemarle County. And what we found was population is right at, I'd say 110, but when we did this report, it was 109,330, and that could have changed since then. 109,000, that is, 330. And what we did was we looked at it and we broke it down to what does our population in the community look like? And particularly what does our diverse citizens population look like versus what our department, and everybody's goal, and everybody knows this who's been around me long enough, knows that my goal is to represent our population that we serve. And that's the goal of every chief and every sheriff that I know. We talk about that at every conference I go to. So the population, the African-American population in Albemarle County is right at, when we did this report, 9.7% for Albemarle County. Now for sworn, we are at 4.5%. Overall, as a department, counting our civilian staff, we're at 5%. So there's room for improvement. We have made small gains. When I took over as chief in 2016, we were probably right around 3%. So we've made some strides there. Hispanic officers, we were at 3.4%. And the population's 5.9% in Albemarle County that comprise our residents here. I have 137 white officers, 92%. And I have our population is 76.6% white. And something that I'm extremely proud of is I have 12% of my police department is female. And I think that is outstanding. I just put two ladies in the academy here recently for the academy that just started. So that's 16 officers out of our police department. And that's not counting the two that I just hired. So I'm very excited about that. So that breaks down the demographics for us. And at the end of this, I'm going to stop and let you guys ask me questions. I'm hitting you with a lot of stuff, but it's critical that you guys get to hear this, and it's very timely. Some of the other questions I was asked was they wanted data on traffic stops. They wanted to know, is there a difference between, people being stopped of color versus people that are white, or what's the percentage, that type of thing. So I asked them to break down the summons data for me this past, and this is for 2019. And in 2019, we issued summonses to 64% white residents or non-residents that could have been driving through. And we issued summonses to 18% African-American. So that number based on the state average is much lower than what the state average is for summonses issued to African-Americans. And a lot of those, I tell people, is we get a lot of commuter traffic between 29 and 64. And what we're finding is we're stopping a lot of people that are coming from Northern Virginia, from Richmond, that come through. So that makes our data go higher. In addition to that, one stop, there could be 2 to 3 or 1 summons issued, which also accounts for the number of summonses issued. So it's important to me that that I get those numbers out, so we're very transparent. And the other thing that I was asked is, along those lines with the traffic stop, is how do we investigate complaints? Like if somebody makes an allegation on a traffic stop, we'll use that for an example, is how do you investigate those? So, how do you look into those and make sure that the citizens getting the service they want when they come forward? I have what's called an Office of Professional Standards. I updated it when I became chief. It was a first line supervisor. I updated it to a commander level because I feel it's important that person in that seat is a commander. They are tasked with investigating all serious internal affairs cases, and they report directly to me. And I felt it's important that any of those type of cases that need to come through the chief. And I think that for those folks that sit in that seat, they get a better understanding of what our community's expectations are. In the last year, I was able to, and I've shared this with some people, I was able to get a very, very good internal affairs program. It's called Blue Team. And before that, it was done on a spreadsheet, folks. I'll be candid with you. We were using 1990 technology. It was, and Carl, I'm not picking on you, you helped us with it. But we really needed to get something that had a really good, robust system that had early warning system in it. That if an officer was making stops, an officer was getting complained on, we got a red flag and it alerted us. But in addition to that, not only is that red flag just for that, but in addition, it's for that officer that may have gone to 2 or 3 very traumatic incidents while out on patrol in the last 2 months. And that could be a SIDS death, which affects all of us very significantly. It could be a traumatic scene of some sort. So we're also having a red flag system on that. So I could not be prouder to have that system. We put it through our new group that we put up here in the county. They had to go through the board and they were able to approve it. Not the board of supervisors, but the board that was put together that approves the IT and the technology. We were able to get that. I was able to offer it to the fire department and different departments within the organization. And what I found was it's really able to capture, and I'm showing you my notes, all the data that I read to you. We're able to do a better job of tracking our information. We're doing a better job of tracking officers that have complaints. And the size of our department, number of complaints I get, we can generally hear it, but this makes it even more so that we're able to determine when somebody's getting a lot of complaints, and we're going to take care of that. In addition to that, I review all internal affairs cases that come through that office up there. And there's been some that I've sent back that I'm not satisfied with, that I asked for additional investigation to be done. Or there's some that were found in compliance that I don't agree with, that I'll overturn. So I let the community know that that's how our process works. It's a very, very, very significant process that's done at my level. So there, you know, sometimes over the last few months, you've heard folks speak about, you know, policing their own. You know, can that be done? And yes, it can. But if you've got to have the right people in the right place with the right training and the right technology. And I really believe it starts with your number one, your leadership. If you don't have that, then no, it won't work. So I really believe that's critical. So that, I know I took a deep dive in that, but that was one of the ones I kept getting a lot of questions on. The last thing I wanted to hit with, there's a few other things I wanted to hit with about calls for service. We were getting some questions about calls for service. And I know I shared this with the Board of Supervisors. I had the privilege to go on over the last 3 months. I got to go on and address the Board of Supervisors. So Diantha has heard a lot of this. So I apologize, Diantha. You're hearing it again, but I think it's important for the group to hear. In addition to being able to talk to Diantha and the Board of Supervisors, I was able to go on to the NAACP meeting with Chief Brackney, and she and I were on there for almost 2 hours with an open mic, so to speak. People could ask questions. It was interactive. And I tell you, the questions were fantastic. A lot of them that I'm hitting with you today came out of that meeting. And I think Chief Brackney and I left with a really good feeling that our community is educated and they want to know what their police department's doing and they want to hold them accountable. And I'm all about that. So I was really excited about that. We've had an opportunity to do some town halls virtual with our community. We did one down in Yancey, which I was excited about. Captain Daryl Byers went down there. Brian, I know you're familiar with Daryl. He's worked with you on several things at the university. And we were able to do some really good outreach in that community, which I feel is underserved, and we need to do a better job. We as an organization need to do a better job in some of those fringe areas where they don't have the service that we have up here. So calls for service last year, and I was taken back by this. We had almost 50,000 calls for service in Albemarle County. And I told you earlier, we have 151 officers, and of those 151, probably 75 to 80 are patrol officers, and they're not on the street, as you guys know, at the same time. So they handled 50,000 calls for service last year, and they made 2,339 arrests. And one of the other questions I was asked, it falls in line with the internal affairs investigations I was talking about. I track all use of forces, and that comes out in the report as well. And last year, on 14 occasions, out of all those 2,339 arrests, 14 occasions, officers were required to use some sort of force. And the most common use of force is what we call hands-on. Somebody's walking away from you if you tell them they're under arrest and you have to grab their arm, put their arms behind their back. That was the most common use. And of those occasions, out of last year, 2019 data, there was no founded cases for excessive force. The officers are trained properly here in Albemarle County, and they go through retraining every year on use of force and de-escalation and being able to gain compliance. So I was very excited about that. What I was not excited about was we had 9 assaults on police officers in 2019, and 5 of those resulted in injuries to the officer. So officers are trying to take care of themselves and take care of and serve and protect the community, but they need to be on, have situational awareness. This will happen from time to time. Thank goodness none of them were serious assaults. And I mentioned earlier about commendations this past year, and it's in the annual report, but we received 122 commendations last year, 122. And think about that for a minute. That means a citizen took the time to write an email or write a letter about the service delivery they received from the Albemarle County Police Department. And I can tell you as a chief, I received emails from folks that have gotten tickets that want to compliment the officer. And that right there, to me, means the most. If somebody's, and we've hit this before, but you know, those of you who've ever been pulled over, raise your hand. You remember that day. You remember that day, even if it was 15 years ago, you remember where you were, what happened, what was said. That's a traumatic thing. So somebody being able to have such a good experience that they take the time, this happened multiple times the last year. I was stopped by one of your officers and I was actually given a summons, but you know what? I wasn't paying attention, but let me explain to you what the officer did. He spent an extra 3 minutes, my 3-minute rule with me, explained to me why he was doing or she was doing what she was doing, explained to me the process, and left me in a better place. And that's what I'm looking for here with this police department is when they have to stop somebody, they're able to spend the time with them. And if we can get accommodation that way, then that's, as a chief, that makes me extremely happy.
Chief, let me take a moment here. You've covered quite a bit of ground. I'd like the committee to have an opportunity to ask you a few questions. Or John, do you have a question for the chief? I know this has been somewhat voluminous, but we'll start with you and go around.
Well, actually, I wrote down a number of questions, and in the process, the chief answered them. So I have nothing new at this time. Thanks.
There, Brian.
Brief question about CIT. I know that the officers are getting trained, and maybe Diantha can also chime in on this. Any, do you think there might be an opportunity to also train residents of the county about the role they can play in kind of identifying those who might be in crisis? So if they have to make a call, at least that's some information they can share with the police department.
That's a great question. Absolutely. Yes. I think that's when we come out of COVID and we can go out into the community and do more of those meetings that we're working with you. And we're going to put you to work on when we do some of the community engagement. I can bring one of my CIT trained instructors and have them give an overview to the community groups. Yes, here's some of the signs and symptoms to look for. And please, here's the time to call us. And the last thing, Richard, that was great timing because that's a great question. I had one bullet point left, Richard, and it was mental health calls for service. And we had last year, mental health calls for service. The Albemarle County Police Department responded to 732 mental health calls for service. So we were averaging over 60 a month dealing with folks in crisis. Brian's a great question.
Excellent question. I agree. And certainly that's one of our challenges is mental health, because our police officers really have to be trained with this. But the other flip to that is that what's happened at the state level is they have pushed, because of lack of resources, they have really pushed mental health services onto the police. And that's a whole nother discussion. I don't want to get into that, but.
Absolutely. Great point, Diane. You and I have spoke offline. We've had some citizens reach out to the board and ask these questions. And I got a good response because I tapped into my 2 CIT instructors. And one of them actually received CIT Trainer of the Year in Virginia last year. So I was very excited for that. Coming up with some type of hybrid program in response to mental health. And I think that's a very good balance. And I experienced this, and I can just go ahead and say it in Fairfax County, we had a mobile crisis unit up there. And that mobile crisis unit would go out and do evaluations and do check-ins with people when they weren't in crisis, right? Just to check in on them, see how they were doing. Or they would say, well, we need the police on this one. So they were able to minimize the number of times the police had to go for, checkup, so to speak. And I think that's something I'd love here, and we can talk offline, but I'd love as a department and as an organization to be able to work towards that one day here.
Olga, do you have any questions for the chief with respect to the last topic?
I do. I have a 2-part question, Chief. Can you give us a couple of examples of how, like, citizens in our community have demonstrated support for the police officers? And then part 2, how can citizens that want to support, what are some ways they can support the ACPD in this crazy time we find ourselves in?
Thank you, Olga. So part 1, support has been overwhelming for the police officers here. We've had people, my goodness, the first month and a half, we had people in our community literally buying every single day lunches and dinners for officers. They went out groups of people that, and this was every day. And you got to think when COVID first hit, nothing was open. So the officers couldn't go to a restaurant during their shift and get a sandwich. So then we've got it still happening today. Somebody just emailed me yesterday and they're going for 2 weeks where they're providing meals for the officers, letters of encouragement. We've been receiving a lot of emails encouraging the officers that they support what we do. Internally, I have the foundation that's wonderful, that does a great job of supporting the staff. And what was part 2 of that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Part 2 was, if there are citizens watching or they will watch it, how can, I've definitely talked to people where they're like, I don't know what to do to support, how can I show my support? What are some ways maybe perhaps the average citizen can, demonstrate their support to ACPD?
Well, I've been asked that question, believe it or not, a lot over the last few months. And what I tell people, the best way to do it now during the times that we're in is email or a letter, because I share that with the entire staff. So everybody will get an opportunity to see it. And it's obviously keeping in social distancing and those type of things. But that's the best way that I see. And the second thing I will say is ask questions. If you want to support, don't hesitate to ask me questions. If you have questions where your neighbor or community member is not sure how we operate, I love when people reach out to me. There's Ask the Chief at albemarle.org where people can ask me questions. And I use that every day. I'm getting emails where people ask me questions or they're looking for guidance. So I would direct them to that and say, hey, if you have any questions you want to ask, reach out to the chief and I will answer them for them. So those are some of the things I would say, Olga. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, we're running low on time, so you're going to need to move along quickly with the remaining items. Chief, can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Greg was distracting me. Say it again, Richard.
We're running low on time, so you need to move along quickly with the remaining items.
Yeah, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the SRO program. Currently is the school board is looking at that program right now. As you know, we had 5 SROs, and once schools went to virtual, we put those SROs in patrol to help supplement. And I've been in contact with Superintendent Matt Haas about the program. I have a great relationship with the schools here and want to support in any way that we can, and we're working through that. We handled 373 calls last year at our high schools. So there was definitely the need, somebody picked up the phone and called the police. So there's still continue to be the need. So we're working with the school board, we're working with Matt and his team to come up with what it's going to look like. And quite frankly, I don't know when the kids will be back to school. So right now it's a great time to be working on what that looks like. Because they're virtual, I think, at least till November, if I'm not mistaken. Then they're going to reevaluate. I believe every 9 weeks they're going to reevaluate what phase they're in. So I wanted to hit everybody with that. And the last thing I wanted to say, Richard, and I'll turn it back to you, and I appreciate you giving me the time. And I apologize to the group that I talked so much, but it was important to me for you to hear from me, the chief, during these times. It's critical that we're having these communications and dialogue. But one of the things I wanted to say really quickly is how proud I am of this police department and how proud I am of the organization. The men and women that were literally told, you can't have leave, you can't leave the area. Literally, you couldn't leave the area and visit family, friends. You were locked in. And oh, by the way, every time you go out on a call, you got to wear PPE and you've got to change how we do business. And they were able to adapt like that. And extremely proud of the organization, the department, and how we've been able to adapt and very fluid in unknown times. We've done a really good job with that, and I couldn't be prouder. And I couldn't be prouder of the community. I've said this multiple times. Our community's really done a great job in supporting the police department and helping keep everybody safe and healthy during COVID. So thank you, Richard.
Deputy Chief of Police Process.
Thank you. So that's starting Wednesday. For those of you who knew Major Casey Carr, she retired August the 1st, and I am replacing her position. I have interviews set up Wednesday. I have 2 interview panels set up, and then Thursday I have another interview panel set up for him with me and Deputy County Executive Doug Walker. And there may be some people from this CAC that I've asked to sit in on the panels because I love getting citizen involvement in those promotions. So that's coming. My hope is that I'm able to announce somebody as early as next week. It's a critical position, as you guys know. Greg Jenkins is my other deputy chief who oversees investigations in the civilian staff. This is the operations part that's all uniform patrol, traffic, school resource, animal control. So they have a lion's share of our staff. So that's this week. Thank you for reminding me, Richard. I appreciate that.
Okay, some questions for the chief. John?
I will withhold my questions at this point.
Brian, do you have anything for the chief?
No additional questions?
Diantha, anything for the chief? Oh, I think you're
Thank you.
muted.
I'm good.
Oh, okay. All right. And of course, Olga. I did have one question from the chair for you. You mentioned before the culture, we have just a couple of minutes, the cultural diversity training that the officers go through. Could you elaborate a little bit further on that? And also mixed in with that, the crisis intervention with respect to lethal force.
So the cultural diversity is mandated by the Department of Criminal Justice, DCJS, that officers have to get that within their 2 years to maintain their certification, Richard. And it's taught at the academy. Cultural diversity can range from different cultures, where officers learn about different cultures and how to interact with different cultures. There's quite a few folks that are teaching cultural diversity now, so it ranges the spectrum. But it's basically what it is in a nutshell is teaching officers about different cultures or backgrounds and how to interact when something may be different from an American culture when they encounter somebody or go on a call for service. So that's what cultural diversity is. And the CIT part, Richard, what was your question with the CIT?
With respect to issues associated with lethal force.
Well, the issues that we're having is with the CIT, our use of force, and I'm knocking on wood, I just gave you the numbers for 2019. We're very, 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 very low. And I attribute that being that we've had so many go through 81% go through the CIT training. And I want to keep working on that once the classes start up and be able to get everybody through that training, because I'm a firm believer in it. And anytime anybody asks me about it, I said, make sure your officers are going to it. And to Brian's point he made earlier, we actually have front desk staff that are civilian, and we send them through what's called mental health first aid. And it's an abbreviated version because they too can encounter people in crisis at the counter. So we're trying to make sure everybody's given an opportunity to get some form of the training.
All righty. Of course, you should know that on next board meeting's agenda will be the topic of public comments that you receive between now and then. And of course, this will give you an opportunity to research and thoroughly explain the answers to those folks in the community that have questions. And there will be an agenda item on our next board meeting that will ask you to provide a report with respect to the public and its questions and your department's answers. So I wanted to give you a heads up for that.
Thank you, Richard.
And we are just about out of time. So any further questions?
When is the next meeting?
I'll get it out today, Olga. It's in October, but I'm not sure of the date off the top of my head.
It's usually second Tuesday at 9 o'clock, but the chief will, of course, firm that up for you and the rest of us. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
No, hold on a minute. I just need to, or is there any public comment? Is there anyone online for public comment? I just wanted to make sure so that I know. Okay, so there's no one signed up for public comment.
No, and you.
Okay, that's great. I just didn't know for sure. And I know we're running short on time, but thank you. Can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
I'll make it very brief. An agenda item I think that we should look at in the future would be to bring Jim Hingley, our Commonwealth Attorney, to a meeting to discuss the intersection with the Commonwealth Attorney and the Police Department and some of Jim Hingley's procedures and how he's going about charging, I think would be a great conversation for this group. That would be my suggestion. It's your all's meeting, so but that would be a really good agenda item.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I've already that's already crossed my mind, and that will absolutely happen. He will be
Great. Great.
asked to join us. And you know, we have to work around his schedule, but
Sure.
he's a very important component for the chief and our community. And
Right.
so, and as you know, in the past, I've had the Commonwealth's attorneys at our meetings.
That'd be great. The other thing I just want to quickly ask, Ron, would you make sure that your annual report goes to all the supervisors as well?
Yes, I'm going to get a hard copy sent to you.
Right.
We've got them earmarked for you now.
That's great. Thank you.
And
And
some
I
extras.
appreciate it, Richard. Thank you.
All right, very good. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
All right, then. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful week.
Stay
Thank you,
safe.
everybody.